The woman skillfully hooked the fishing line with her finger, then opened the spool. After confirming no one was behind her, she raised the lure rod above her head, released her finger at the moment of casting to form a bait throw. After the lure entered the water, she closed the spool tightly, reeling in the line at a certain speed, making the lure swim like a real fish in the water. This is the legendary lure fishing method. Next came the male protagonist's first attempt. Although he didn't miss any steps, his first cast wasn't successful, landing directly at a close point. Everyone encouraged him not to be discouraged. After all, everyone is like this when they first begin. However, after his second cast, he found he had improved significantly. The male protagonist hadn't expected that he would have talent in fishing, yet it was this cast that completely freed him from his worthless life. It turned out that not long ago, the male protagonist was diagnosed with cancer, with only 2 years left to live. Not only that, he also owed various huge debts, so he chose $1 million, spending his remaining time playing pachinko. On this day, the debt collectors found him. Afraid of being dragged out and beaten, he could only choose to run away quickly. This made him reflect on his life. Why had he fallen to his current state? He should have known he could have become a person of high society. Thinking about this, the protagonist became angry. He had just borrowed some money. Why did the debt snowball so much? Debt that was originally repayable now became impossible to handle. But at this moment, the protagonist had a bold idea: to borrow without restraint and live comfortably for these 2 years. After all, he wouldn't live long anyway. However, all these words were overheard by the debt collectors who had followed him. The protagonist was forced to turn and run. Soon he had nowhere to go and climbed onto a nearby railing. The debt collector tried to grab him, but the protagonist slipped and fell into the water. Because he couldn't swim, he could only struggle frantically until he lost strength. The protagonist understood that he was truly beyond saving now. However, after losing consciousness, he was fished out by a group of strangers. The flower girl explained that today was high tide, and the weather and water temperature conditions were all suitable, so it was impossible to send him back the same way. But the protagonist felt somewhat disappointed after hearing this. He was still alive. The first thing he did upon waking up was not to thank his rescuers, but to want to go home immediately. The pink-haired girl explained this was difficult because they were currently on a boat at sea. This was a fisherman's paradise. Seeing the protagonist so dejected, the pink-haired girl apologized for her mistake, saying she would take him back after finishing fishing. Hearing about fishing, his first reaction was that this was a hobby for middle-aged men. But why were the people on this boat so leisurely and carefree, even though they hadn't caught any fish from the beginning? Not a single one. What was the point of this? But at this moment the protagonist was attracted by the flower girl in the distance. Why would such a sweet girl have this kind of hobby? However, the flower girl's smooth operation that followed immediately left the protagonist dumbfounded.